I'm going to call on a card for someone to tell me, what does true breeding mean? Somia. Okay. Julia, does that sound good to you? Yes, very good. Purebred is a good way to kind of think of that. And we know that you're only going to get one kind of offspring, right? Because both parents are homozygous. Wonderful. I'll do the next example over here. Fish scales are codominant. Nikki, what did your alleles look like? We had purple, orange, and purple and orange. What allele symbols did you use? Yes, so we're going to have a superscript. I would say your superscript should be P for purple, but we need one letter that will be the same for all three. C? C for color would make sense. I like that. Okay, so CP and then C O, and then this one would be CPCO, right? Okay, so we have two alleles. We have a purple allele and an orange allele. Very good. We are crossing what? A purple fish and an orange fish. So Josie, what does our purple fish look like? What two alleles do we use for a all purple fish? CP. CP, CP. Very good. And Heidi, what are we going to use for our orange fish? CO, CO. Everyone good so far? All right, good. So we do CP, CO, ECO, CP, CO, P. Did I do that right? All right, good. So we need the genotype percentages. Lucas, what is the genotype percentage is for this answer? Very good. I'm so glad you did 100% CP, CO. If you wrote 100% purple and orange, that would be wrong because I did not ask you for phenotype. Yes, it's a correct analysis, but it would be a wrong answer based on the question. Does that make sense? Right? So if you put 100% purple and orange, you weren't necessarily wrong in your thinking. It just, you want to read the question very quickly. Okay? All right, cool. Let's move on. We're talking about genetic disorders today. We'll go into some examples. Don't forget our Saturday IA workday. Next week, I'm going to create a sign-up genius so I know who's coming so we can plan for space and food and things like that. We can also maybe create a poll on food suggestions. Anything food suggestion wise though is going to need to be close nearby because one of us is going to have to go pick it up. So I'm not driving all the way to Chipotle. That's a waste of my time, right? No. You need to be here working. So think of something like in the closer general area. Okay. All right. I will never eat Little Caesars. I would rather eat cardboard. I'm so sorry if you like Little Caesars. My bad if I just offended you. Yes. Yes. If we're going to do pizza, we need to do something better. We can afford better than Little Caesars. Okay. Yes. Yes. Pizza Hut, I can do. Grumpy Tom's is even better. Oh, yeah. It's over by Stater Brothers. Next to Del Taco, Starbucks. Is there? Yeah, there's a Chinese food and donuts. I've never eaten at that Chinese food. Yeah. Like better than Panda? Panda right across the street. You have to try it. I'll have to try it. Okay, we left off here, yes? We have this written in our packet. You see on this page? I'm going to start remembering to number the paper. You on the right page? Okay. Cool. So to review from yesterday, we looked at their different types of inheritance patterns. And this is going to be important when we get to our pedigrees. We need to look at a pedigree and be able to determine, is it dominant or recessive? Is it autosomal or sex-linked? Okay. Just remember, autosomal is the opposite of sex-linked. Yeah. You don't have it on there, but you should know what autosomal means because those are all chromosomes except the sex chromosome. Okay. All right. So these are the patterns of inheritance. Next question is, why are genetic diseases rare in the population? So we can kind of think of it in terms of like natural selection, evolution way, but most genetic diseases are caused by a recessive allele. Therefore, it only develops if you do not have the dominant allele. So it's a lot less likely to get both alleles. Right? Especially with what we know about looking at human history or family history. Like if both mom and dad have a history of cystic fibrosis, that might be kept in mind when they're making a choice to have a baby. Yeah, it definitely is. If the parents are both, let's just make it simple and say cystic fibrosis is big C, little c. So C would be normal and little c would be abnormal. So both parents could be healthy, right? Big C, times big C, little c. Neither of these parents has cystic fibrosis, but it would be likely that somewhere in their past, somewhere in their family history, it was affecting somebody in the past. So if it was affecting somebody in the past, that would mean it's likely that they're a carrier. So we know that they're a carrier. But if we do this Punnett square, only one of those boxes would be little c, right? If we were to write it all out. So if both parents are healthy, but have cystic fibrosis in their family, it's possible it's only a 25%. If one parent had cystic fibrosis, then that does increase your chance. So that would be something you keep in mind when you are having a baby. Definitely. Yep. Little c would be 100%. So that would be a choice, right? These two people would choose. Do we want to have a baby with this disease, or do we want to either have, you could get like a sperm donor, or you could do a surrogate, or you can adopt, like all those other options. Yes. There should be in the back. Right back there. Okay. So genetic diseases caused by a recessive allele usually appear unexpectedly. Okay, both parents of a child with a disease may be carriers, but if they don't show the disease, it's more unexpected. So on that note, we need to know what a carrier is. Did we read this? There are truly rare people born all the time. Around 350 million people on Earth are living with rare disorders. About 80% of these rare disorders are genetic in origin. So it's rare, but even like with our giant population, it's still a lot of people, right? To be a carrier is kind of what I was just talking about over there with my CCs. A carrier means you don't have the disease, but you carry the allele for the disease. Okay. So a person has one allele for the genetic disease. They will not show symptoms, but they can pass it on. It says here, only in genetic diseases caused by a recessive allele. Why could you not be a carrier for a dominant disease? Because it's dominant. If you have even one allele, you're showing, right? So you can't be a carrier. It's a dominant genetic disease. Even one allele, you have the disease. So we can only have carriers in the case of recessive genetic disorders. You can start to see the examples. Some of these diseases we've seen a little bit in the past. Like, which ones are you familiar with? Yep. Yep. Bleed. Yes. You don't clot well. Yes.
Oh, that's
Mr. Moore did? Or does? He's still alive. Yes. Probably. But isn't hemophilia? Yeah. But actually, that's a good question because, right. I think there might be like a separate mechanism of, because the lining sheds and comes out. So it's not like your lining is going to continue shedding, right? It's just it sheds once and comes out. So actually, maybe not. That's a great question, though. If you want to Google it, definitely. Common examples. Okay, sickle cell. We need to know. You have your data table here, right? We need to know, is it dominant or recessive? Is it sex-linked? And what happens if you have this mutation? So sickle cell is autosomal codominance. So autosomal meaning what? Not sex chromosome. Very good. So autosomal codominance for this one. So is it sex-linked? No, because it's autosomal. So when you see autosomal, it's not sex-linked. You just put an N there. Affect the mutation associated with the disease causing allele. The red blood cells are misshapen. They're sickled. You guys know what a sickle is?
my old caretaker had sickle cell. She just one day she just woke up screaming.
Yeah, they have what's called like attacks. So they can like lead a pretty good normal life, and then they'll have like a sickle cell attack, and it's just like really, really, really painful. I was watching one of the doctor shows. I don't remember which one it is. They all kind of meld together in my head. But they, there was like an experimental, I think it was gene therapy treatment. And they ended up doing the gene therapy on this woman who had sickle cell. And I think it worked. Yeah, I think it worked. And it was like she was cured. Yes, so this is an interesting one. Because like we said, this is codominant. So look at your heterozygous. Your heterozygous, you have sickle and normal. So it's not as bad, right?
You only have sickle.
You have sickle and normal.
No, but like in the last one.
In the last one, you only have sickle cell.
Like, got your body just only sickle.
Just only sickle.
And
all your red blood cells look
how
like
does that
this.
affect the person?
But it has fatal sickle cell disease. So they either don't live very long, or they, I don't know how soon it's fatal. But if you have the mild sickle cell disease, you can live like a more normal life. But both of these, you're resistant to malaria. So this is so interesting that something terrible actually gives you something good too. It's like, it's a weird connection. So if you have normal, healthy blood cells, you could get malaria. But if you have sickle cells, you're actually resistant. I don't actually know the connection there. I think it's just that whatever that gene, whatever that allele is, affects two different things. Okay. We don't need to read all of that. You could add this to your effects, just the red stuff, like always. Signs and symptoms. When the red blood cells sickle, they break down prematurely, which can lead to anemia. Anemia can cause shortness of breath, fatigue, delayed growth and development in children. Rapid breakdown of red blood cells may also cause yellowing of the eyes and skin, which are signs of jaundice. Painful episodes can occur when sickled red blood cells, which are stiff and inflexible, get stuck in small blood vessels. Okay, so the sickle cells can get stuck in the small blood vessels, depriving tissues and organs of oxygen-rich blood. So when your tissues are starving, they're going to be painful, which can lead to organ damage, especially in the lungs, kidneys, spleen, and brain. A particularly serious complication of sickle cell disease is high blood pressure in the blood vessels that supply the lungs. All right. So here's one example of a genetic disorder that is autosomal codominant. You too. Cystic fibrosis, autosomal recessive. So in the first box, you can just put recessive. Is it sex-linked? No, because it's autosomal. The parents of an individual with an autosomal recessive condition, which each carry one copy, typically do not show signs, like we were talking about before. You actually already saw this mutation in our last unit, where we talked about the mutation stops the protein from working, which allows mucousy stuff to build up. So that's what you're adding the effect. The mutation disrupts the function of the chloride channels, preventing them from regulating flow of chloride ions and water across membranes. You definitely want to, we have to look at the standards. Always go back to your syllabus statements. What does it say? Yeah, so it says like 3.4U7 says explain sickle cell anemia as an example of a genetic disease. So in that explanation, you'd want to say that it's a autosomal codominant disease and the effects of it. So yeah. You also need to know PKU. It says outline the genetic cause of PKU, list consequences of PKU. We're going to go over that. Oh, that's a good question. I think theoretically there is not really a limit. Realistically, I don't think very many. It's possible. Definitely. Right. I think realistically it wouldn't be something that would happen because like natural selection wise, right? Like you in the animal world, sick animals don't usually get bred. Right. It's definitely possible. If we wanted to create that, we could. We could artificially breed for that. We could create that. But why would we? Right? But it is possible. Yes. I figured it out. Females with yeah, they just have irregular bleeding times. But it's not like a deadly thing every month. They have to monitor how much they're losing each cycle, so they can go back and be like, hey. Right. Because then if it is that bad, I'm sure there's medications that can increase the clotting factors and all of that. That's good to know. Good to know. All right, we've gone over cystic fibrosis a bunch. Let's keep going. I try to give you video breaks.
Is a genetic disease that affects multiple organs, including your lungs, and limits your ability to breathe over time. Your main airway, called the trachea, branches into each of your lungs. The largest airway within each lung is called a bronchus, and each bronchus branches into smaller airways called bronchioles.
Normally, airways are coated inside with a thin layer of fluid and mucus.
The mucus catches dust and germs from the air you breathe in. Then, hair-like projections on the airway surface, called cilia, push the mucus, trap dust, and germs out of the lungs. In cystic fibrosis, the mucus is so thick and sticky that the cilia can't push it out of your lungs. This thick, sticky mucus can build up, trap germs like bacteria, and block your airways. Because of this, you may periodically have acute infections or exacerbations of the disease, causing symptoms such as increased coughing, production of mucus, and shortness of breath. As the disease progresses, long-term damage can occur in your lungs. This happens when germs, like bacteria, get into your lungs and cause chronic infections and inflammation. But there's a lot you can do to control the infections and slow the progression of lung damage. Talk to your CF Care team about how the different parts of your treatment.
I think it's kind of too delicate for that. If you're getting an infection, they're going to just have to treat it with antibiotics and things like that. The problem is with antibiotics, the bacteria can kind of become immune to our antibiotics. So they kind of stop working after a while. Also, the damage that's caused in your lungs is permanent, so it increases over time. So every time you get an infection, it's worse and worse. Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah, they usually need a transplant. Yeah. But even with the transplant, you're still having the effect of the proteins not functioning. So it's not a permanent fix, but it does extend life quite a bit. Yeah, it is. But I imagine like you wake up and you're like, oh, I can breathe again. But it is very risky. There is rejection issues, and you have to go on long-term medication to make sure your body doesn't reject. And finding a donor doesn't always happen. Especially if you are sick. If you have one of these diseases that's basically you're going to get new lungs and they're going to suffer too, then you're not as high up on the list of donor. Yes. You can donate partial lobes of lungs. Or no, not lungs, livers. You can do that with your liver. Like if you could donate part of your liver, I think so. I don't know if that works with lungs. Huh? You probably need to be a little more careful, like not abusing your liver with drugs and alcohol. But you shouldn't be doing that anyways. I don't think you get paid. That's definitely crossing some ethical boundaries. Yeah. Where do they get them? Oh, I think people who have cancer, where it's just in the lung, then we can take out the cancerous lung, put it in, or somebody who it got damaged somehow. But that's a good question. There's a way for you to see like the organ list and how they make their decisions. Like you could look that up. Okay, next one, Huntington. You should be writing. Are you writing? Be writing. So it's where disrupt the function of the chloride channels. You're probably gonna have to copy that later. Yes. That's a good question. I don't know. I know you can donate some. It'll just, yeah. But the more you take, like when it's growing back, you're gonna be very in danger. And also you can live with one kidney, so you can donate a whole kidney. All right, Huntington, we're autosomal and we're dominant. You cannot sell your organs, people. I could sell it on eBay. Is it sex linked? No. Please do not sell your organs. People, donate them because you're a good person. Mutations. This is going to become homework if you guys can't stay on track. Mutations on the HTT. Function of this protein is unknown. So for the effect of the mutation, the actual protein, we're not really sure about yet. But I think on the next slide, I have more effect. Yes. All right, so we're doing dominant, no, function of protein, unknown. We know it appears to play an important role in the neurons in the brain, but we don't know exactly what the protein itself does, but we do know the effects of the disease, which is progressive brain disorder, uncontrolled movements, emotional problems, loss of thinking ability. Individuals usually live about 15 to 20 years after signs and symptoms. So this is the one where you don't get signs and symptoms until you're in your 20s, 30s. That's when it presents itself. And from there, you can live another 15 to 20 years before it takes over. Yes. Because the protein is the Huntington. It's the Huntington gene with an I, and it's called Huntington disease. I don't know. Sometimes it's because of a person who discovered it, maybe. But this one, and even the HTT gene stands for Huntington gene. That might be Mr. Huntington who discovered the gene, or I don't know. I don't really know how they decide. Huntington disease usually appears in a person's 30s or 40s, sorry. Symptoms can, yes. You can test if you have the gene for Huntington. Yeah, I think that might be what's in this video. Okay.
Learning medicine is hard work. Osmosis makes it easy. It takes your lectures and notes to create a personalized study plan with exclusive videos, practice questions. Huntington disease, or HD, is a rare neurodegenerative disease that involves a repeated sequence of DNA that causes an abnormal protein to form, leading to abnormal movements and cognitive problems. Huntington disease is an autosomal dominant genetic disorder, which means that one affected copy of the gene is enough to cause disease. Affected people are typically present in each generation because an affected person, male or female, has a 50% chance of passing on the affected gene to a child, which causes that child to have the disease. In most people, a gene called Huntington, or HTT, on chromosome 4 contains a triplet repeat, where nucleotides C, A, and G are repeated 10 to 35 times in a row. In people with Huntington disease, this repeat goes on for 36 or more times in a row. CAG codes for the amino acid glutamine, so people with Huntington disease will have 36 or more glutamines in a row in the Huntington protein. So in addition to being a triplet repeat disorder, HD is, more specifically, a polyglutamine disease. The specific way in which extra glutamines causes HD symptoms isn't fully worked out. But some clues are that the mutated protein aggregates within the neuronal cells of the caudate and the putamen of the basal ganglia, causing neuronal cell death. Cell death might be related to excitotoxicity, which is excessive signaling of these neurons, which leads to high intracellular calcium. The expanded CAG repeats not only affect the Huntington protein, they also affect DNA replication itself. When copying the HTT gene, DNA polymerase can basically lose track of which CAG it's on, and accidentally add extra CAGs. Since as a zygote develops into a fetus and eventually into a full adult, by the time sperm and eggs are created, several dozen cell divisions, each with a round of DNA replication, have taken place. And so there have been a lot of opportunities for repeat expansion. And the more repeats that are added, the more unstable it gets. This expansion of the originally inherited gene means that a child of a parent with HD can inherit even more CAG repeats than the parent did. The higher the number of repeats in the protein, the earlier the age when a person starts having symptoms. And this phenomenon is called anticipation, which means that the Huntington disease families often show earlier symptom onset with each generation. Even repeats of 27 to 35 CAGs can expand occasionally, and these are called pre-mutation alleles, since they don't cause the disease, but they're set up for developing a mutation of 36 or more CAGs. Like we've mentioned, this process of adding more repeats is called repeat expansion, and it happens way more in the production of sperm than of eggs. So both
Okay, and that's good. So one of the issues with Huntington's is if you don't have symptoms until your 30s, oftentimes people have already had children by then, right? So that's one of the reasons why it stays pretty prominent, even though it's a dominant disorder. But yes, we did talk about how you can test for it. This is the video I was thinking of. So this one says Huntington's disease. I'm taking a test that will reveal my future. 18 years ago, Danielle's mom, Lisa, started having aggressive outbursts, stumbling a lot and feeling anxious. She's now in the late stages of Huntington's and requires full-time care. Huntington's disease, we already kind of talked about all of that. Because her mom has the disease, Danielle and her sister Sophie each have a 50% chance of developing the condition. Lisa didn't know there was a history of Huntington's disease in her family until she started experiencing symptoms. If you do know there's Huntington's in your family, you can have a test from the age of 18 to see if you'll also get it. Sophie said no to the test. Danielle wants to know. This is her journey. Yes. No, I think they were talking about gametes in general.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're not gonna be able to watch all 9 minutes.
Oh, very.
I'll tell you that right now. But you do have access to the presentation if you want to go back.
Oh, very.
Good question. I'd have to Google that. Americans?
There's a 50% chance that I could have it and a 50% chance that my sister could have it. I've always wanted to know, and you have never wanted to know. I feel that if I tested positive,
so would
I'd
you want to
have
know?
like a dark
I think
cloud
we asked
over
this
me.
before.
They are just
What do you want?
the odds.
And would that answer
I've
be
been
different
given.
if you were
I
planning on
don't
having children? Because you might want to know, you might not want to know for you, but if you're having children, would you want to know for them? And would that affect your
So you want a slice of the chocolate mint?
finding this out?
Running a business is challenging in itself, but it's also a relief
I have
from
no
everything
history of
else that's
Huntington's.
going on with
Neither
Mum
of our
and with
families.
Huntington's disease.
Does it mean it's
I can
impossible?
switch off when I'm here.
Doesn't mean it's impossible.
Here's Mum and Dad when they got married.
Um,
People generally haven't heard of Huntington's disease. It's a really old picture of Mum and Dad. And my mum was diagnosed with Huntington's 18
the
years
one thing
ago.
we could think about
Mum
too, and I don't know if
didn't
this is
that
actually in
Huntington's
use
disease
or
was in her
if we have
family.
technology
And me and my
for it,
sister
is
weren't told at first because my mum and dad
if
didn't
I
really
got
understand
tested and
what
it
the
turned out that I
condition
have the
was.
allele
So
for
that was
Huntington's,
3 years ago, and that
then
was the last
could
time
I
that Mum
control
was walking around
which
before she
of
went
my
into a
alleles is
wheelchair.
given to my baby?
But yeah, that's the last picture we
Which
got.
I
of
think
her.
we
She was
might be
standing.
on
So
the
it was very hard for me
on
and my
the
sister
edge of having that
finding
technology.
out.
So basically what I
think
could do
overheard a
is
phone call that my
I
mum
have a
was
bunch of
having with a
eggs
friend,
that I get
and
tested,
then I told my sister.
and then they
When I
might
was a
be able
teenager,
to
I was
see
embarrassed
this
to
egg
bring people
has
home
the
because I
allele,
didn't know
this
how
egg does
Mum
not have the allele.
was going to be,
And then
or
we fertilize the
if she
egg
was going to have an
that doesn't have
outburst.
it. I'm pretty sure we have that technology. I don't know the ethical laws on that currently. Right. And the ethical boundary would be, now I have an egg that now I'm destroying that could have been life. Some
I
people
got
have
married
issues
this
about
year.
that.
We may want to start a
We do
family
that
in the
anyways,
future.
right?
So
But this
that,
isn't-
on
this
top
is
of
a
wanting to know
conversation
as
that is
well, has kind of
when
pushed me in
we
the direction of
Also,
going
it might
forward
be
and
that
getting the
you
ball
have to
rolling.
let it develop a little before you can test it.
I'm here today.
I don't know
for
if they
my
can
first
test just one
appointment,
egg. Maybe
at
they
Great
might
Ormond
have to let it
Street
develop
to start my counselling sessions for
and
my
then at that
testing
point
for
if you
Huntington's
kill it,
disease. I thought I felt all
then
right
it's a
yesterday,
little
and
more.
then when I got into
But
bed
still,
last
people
night,
are
loads of
on
things started playing on my mind.
and that's right.
But I'm feeling okay. I'm
So,
quite excited to get the
and
process
then it gets us
started
into
now.
the whole designer babies. So I'm doing it to make sure my kid doesn't have Huntington's. But could we be using that?
For now, at least, you still test.
Or
Definitely, I still want to
make sure
test.
you're
Yeah.
That's something.
My mum used to have
I wish we could watch all of
really
this, but-
aggressive outbursts.
It's an interesting thing to think about and talk about. And that's just one of the ones that we have a test for. Not all genetic diseases do we have tests for. This is just another story. Okay, PKU. PKU. This is something my baby will be tested for on like, I don't know, day 1 or week 1 or something of his life. This is autosomal recessive. So is it sex linked? No. This one is called mutations in the PAH gene. It's called phenylketonuria. Phenylketonuria, yes. I think we might be coming back to it. Yeah, I know we did. We currently do not have that written. Don't worry. So the PAH gene provides instructions for making an enzyme. Remember, enzymes are proteins called phenylalanine hydroxylase. Phenylalanine is an amino acid. The enzyme converts the amino acid phenylalanine to other important compounds in the body. So we have this enzyme that usually breaks down this amino acid and turns it into other important things. If phenylalanine hydroxylase does not function, phenylalanine from the diet is not processed effectively. Almost kind of like the idea of cystic fibrosis, where the mucus builds up because the proteins aren't functioning. This, again, is a protein that's not functioning. So we have a buildup of phenylalanine. As a result, this amino acid can build up to toxic levels in the blood and other tissues. So in general, normal healthy people, we eat phenylalanine all the time. It's part of our protein, right? We eat protein made of a bunch of amino acids. And then our body processes it and we're all good to go. In this case, this specific amino acid is not processed and it can build up and be toxic. Yes. Okay. Did you put amino acid? I'm sorry. Okay. So as you can see here, this is just the process. You don't need to know this of that process. Okay. Newborns in the United States are required to get a PKU test. They take it from their little foot. PKU is the first condition for which widespread newborn testing was implemented. Before newborn screening programs could detect PKU in the first few hours after birth, PKU was one of the leading causes of intellectual and developmental disabilities. Today, as a result of newborn screening programs, PKU has been virtually eliminated as a cause of disabilities in this country because it is treatable. So if we can recognize it and we can treat it, then it's really not a problem anymore, right? You don't lead a normal life, but it's not as big of a problem. Treatment consists of a diet containing little or no phenylalanine. If children with the condition are placed on this diet at birth, they have normal lives with no health problems. And you can look up, I thought I had it on here. There's like a PKU diet and it tells you what you can and can't. There's like certain proteins you have to stay away from. It's really not that difficult. But look, like this one, sugar substitute, granulated sugar substitute has phenylalanine in it. So don't feed that to your child or you if you have it. Coca-Cola, Diet Coke apparently has phenylalanine. Like I said, for you guys, does anybody have PKU? You would know. Yes. from the prick? What do you mean? I think they do because wounds, like wounds in your mouth, heal really fast as well because they're more moist. So your feet generally are a little more moist than other parts of your body. Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. And you heal pretty fast.
Like by the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it's necessarily because it's more moist, but I do think that, yeah. Man, stepping on a nail sucks, doesn't it? I did that once. My stupid roommate, okay, she's still actually my best friend, but she was doing a project that was supposed to be like one of those like rain sound things. So she had a paper towel, she put a bunch of nails in it. She had to like put nails on the side and then beans in it or whatever. She dropped the box of nails on the living room carpet and she picks them up, but there was one under the couch. So I was kind of like walking, like, you know, in the morning when you kind of scoot your feet, and I scooted right onto a nail. It went right into my foot. And I was so mad at her. And she was like, I picked them all up. I'm like, obviously not, because there's one in my foot right now. I was so mad at her. I was like, when you drop nails, you're supposed to double check, right? Like, check everywhere. Anyways, at least it was a clean nail. It wasn't a rusty nail. I did go to I guess we skipped hemophilia. Where was that? Oh, you know why? I know why. Because it's in the sex link section. We'll get there. I remember now. If you keep going, it'll be there. It is there. You can look it up and fill it in if you want, but we'll get to it. Do I have homework for you? Yes. What am I going to tell you to work on? IA. You don't have to do any of them on your own yet. Syllabus statements. There we go. On your syllabus statements, let's do better than last time, yeah?